I still remember the day my cousin learned, the hard way, that you can't measure a person by the shine of their shoes. The moment itself was quick, almost quiet, but it landed like a thunderclap. 1 second she was smiling that polished, practiced smile she used for photos, and the next her face went stiff, like someone had yanked the power cord out of her whole identity. The funny part is, the warning signs were always there. We all saw the way she talked, the way she ranked people in her head, the way she treated my aunt like a living example of what not to become. We just didn't know there was a trapdoor under all that confidence. And when it opened, the drop was brutal. I grew up in suburban Australia where family time wasn't a suggestion, it was a calendar rule. Every Christmas, every Easter, every birthday that involved a milestone number, we'd end up at my grandparents' place on the north side of Sydney, the kind of big, older house that smells like polish and history. My grandparents loved tradition, the kind with proper napkins and a roast that takes half a day. The cousins would spill into the backyard, the adults would settle into their usual corners, and the same stories would loop like a playlist. And somehow, no matter how the day started, my cousin Chloe would always find a moment to take a neat little swipe at my Aunt Marlene, as if it was part of the meal. Aunt Marlene was my mum's younger sister, and she didn't fit the family's preferred aesthetic. While everyone else drove shiny SUVs and upgraded their cars like it was a hobby, she drove an old Corolla that had survived more summers than some of my cousins' relationships. It had a faded bumper, a dent on one side, and a sticker about kindness that Chloe loved to roll her eyes at. While my uncles talked about renovations and property portfolios, Marlene rented a small flat above a second-hand bookshop in Newcastle, the kind with creaky stairs and window displays full of dog-eared novels. She wore the same few cardigans, bought things on sale, and treated a night out at the local Thai place like a special occasion. She was calm, tidy, and quietly stubborn about living within her own rules. To Chloe, that translated into failure. Not real failure, not the kind where someone can't cope or needs help, but the sort of failure rich people whisper about when they want to feel safe. Marlene was the family's cautionary tale, Chloe said, the proof that you could waste potential by choosing the wrong life. She'd say it with a laugh like it was harmless, but she always aimed it like a dart. I used to watch Marlene's face during those comments, waiting for a reaction, and she never gave one. She'd just keep serving food, keep asking people about their kids, keep smiling that small, private smile like she was listening to a different conversation. Chloe's life looked like it had been built for an advert. She married Lachlan Young, and he made serious money in finance, the kind of job title that sounded vague but paid for everything. They lived in a bright, modern place in Mosman with more bathrooms than anyone needed, and a view that made visitors go quiet for a second. Chloe's social media was all curated perfection. Designer bags, beach resorts, yoga photos with captions about gratitude, and brunch tables that looked staged. She had tens of thousands of followers who applauded every manifest your dream life post as if she'd invented ambition. In real life, she spoke the same way, like she was performing at a camera even when there wasn't one. One Christmas a couple of years ago, Chloe was in full flight at the dining table, holding her phone out like a trophy and showing off photos from a luxury island getaway. She talked about private transfers, rooftop cocktails, and how Latch surprised her because he was just the sweetest. Everyone smiled politely, even the ones who didn't care, because Chloe had trained us all to play along. Marlene sat near the end of the table, passing dishes and keeping the flow moving, completely unbothered. That's when Chloe did it again. She tilted her head and asked, in that syrupy voice, whether Marlene had ever been anywhere tropical. The table tightened. You could feel it. Marlene shrugged and said she hadn't, like it was the least interesting fact on Earth. Chloe laughed and turned it into a sermon. She said not everyone could afford international travel, but there was nothing wrong with enjoying simpler things. She made sure to smile when she said it, as if she was being generous. My mum gave me a look across the table, the same look she always gave, the one that asked the same question without words. Why does Marlene let her get away with it? But Marlene just changed the subject, asked Chloe about the charity event she'd been bragging about online, and watched Chloe light up again. Chloe loved charity the way she loved designer labels, as proof of status. She talked about fundraising like it made her superior by default, and she made sure Marlene heard every word. A week or two later, I got a message from Marlene that made me sit up. She said she was hosting a fundraiser at a private club in Newcastle the following Saturday and asked if I could come. She added a dress code, cocktail attire, like it was nothing. I stared at the screen. Marlene and private clubs didn't belong in the same sentence, not based on what the family thought they knew about her. She wasn't the type to chase exclusive venues. She was the type to buy second-hand books and bring homemade slices to work. I said yes anyway because curiosity is a powerful thing, and because something about her wording felt steady, like she wasn't asking permission to step into a new world. She was simply inviting me to watch. When my mum heard, she was confused too. Chloe, on the other hand, acted like she'd been personally offended by the invitation. She called my mum and said it had to be a mistake, that Marlene couldn't afford a venue like that it was probably some awkward little gathering pretending to be fancy. Then she said she'd attend, because someone had to make sure Marlene didn't embarrass the family. That's what Chloe always did. She framed her cruelty as responsibility. She made it sound noble to look down on people. And I could tell she was excited, not to support Marlene, but to witness a failure and feel justified. On the night of the event, I pulled into the car park in my plain little hatchback and immediately felt like I'd arrived at the wrong address. The lot was full of polished European cars and shiny four-wheel drives. The building itself was the sort of place that felt like it had rules in the walls: manicured hedges, soft lighting, staff who moved quietly and knew exactly where to stand. Inside, the room had been styled like a proper high-end function. There were floral arrangements, a live musician, trays of drinks moving through the crowd, and auction items that looked like they belonged in a magazine. It wasn't a casual fundraiser. It was serious, and it was expensive looking, and it didn't match the family's version of Marlene at all. Then I saw her near the entrance, greeting people with warmth that didn't feel performative. She wore a simple navy dress, no loud jewelry, nothing screaming for attention. She hugged me, thanked me for coming, and spoke about the cause like she cared about it, not like she needed credit for it. When I asked what it was for, she said it was supporting a children's hospital program and brushed it off as just something small. That word, small, sounded ridiculous in that room. I looked around at the crowd, trying to place faces, and that's when Chloe arrived like a flashbulb. She wore a dress that glittered under the lights and heels that looked like they'd never touched a footpath. Chloe did the fake cheek kiss routine and immediately made a comment about how cute the whole thing was, asking Marlene how long she'd had to save to pull it off. It was Chloe's favorite move, disguising an insult as curiosity. Marlene didn't bite. She just said it came together well, and that tiny smile appeared again, the one that made you feel like she knew something you didn't. Chloe walked into the room and started scanning the crowd, ready to network, ready to be seen. But within minutes, the attention she expected to receive drifted away from her, like she'd stepped onto a stage and realized the spotlight wasn't installed for her. A man in an immaculate suit approached Marlene with easy familiarity, like they'd known each other for years. He greeted her warmly, thanked her for guidance on a business deal, and spoke to her as if her opinion mattered. Then another person arrived, someone I recognized from the news, and they spoke to Marlene about community health funding like she was a key player, not a random guest. After that, it just kept happening. A university leader thanked her for supporting scholarships. A local entrepreneur spoke about how her early advice helped them stay afloat. People didn't just greet her, they respected her. They leaned in when she spoke. They listened. Chloe's face started shifting through different emotions, confusion first, then irritation, then a tight kind of fear that didn't fit her usual confidence. I found Marlene during a brief quiet moment and asked her what was going on because I couldn't keep pretending this was normal. She looked at me gently, like she'd been expecting the question. I said people were acting like she was important, like she had influence. Marlene gave a soft laugh, not mocking, just amused. She said she'd always been herself and that she never needed to announce her life to anyone. The way she said it wasn't arrogant. It was simply true. Before I could ask more, someone came over to speak with her, and she stepped away without rushing, like someone who belonged exactly where she was. Chloe cornered me not long after, eyes sharp, voice low, trying to control the narrative. She demanded to know why everyone was treating Marlene like she was some big deal. She listed her evidence like it was a court case. Marlene rented a flat above a bookshop, drove an old car, dressed plainly. Chloe insisted it had to be confusion, mistaken identity, or people being polite. But her own words sounded weak even to her. You could see the doubt leaking into the cracks. For once, Chloe didn't know what room she was in. She kept looking around like someone might explain the rules to her. And the worst part for her was that nobody seemed interested in doing that. 2 weeks later, we were back at my grandparents' place for Christmas Eve. The house was packed, noisy, warm from cooking, and heavy with tradition. After dinner, when the desserts came out and the adults settled into their usual spots, my grandfather stood up and tapped his glass. He said Marlene wanted to say a few words. Chloe's head turned toward me with that look that said she was bracing for something awkward, something she could later laugh about. Marlene stood calmly in her cardigan and sensible shoes, completely at ease, and thanked everyone for being there. She said family mattered to her, and because of that, she wanted to share something she should have said a long time ago. She explained, in a measured voice, that she knew some people saw her simple lifestyle as a sign she hadn't succeeded. She didn't say Chloe's name, but everyone felt it anyway. She said the truth was she'd made a choice about how she wanted to live. Then she told us that when she turned 21, she gained access to a trust arrangement set up by her grandmother with confidentiality clauses that kept it quiet. The room changed. You could feel it. She explained that the fund began decades earlier with family business money and had grown over time through careful management and smart investing. She gave a number that made several people gasp out loud, the kind of figure that doesn't fit comfortably in a living room conversation. Marlene didn't deliver it like a boast. She delivered it like a weather report. She said she chose not to touch the principal and instead lived on her librarian's salary because she wanted to understand the value of work, independence, and a life that felt real to her. She said the income from the fund was reinvested or directed into causes she cared about: hospitals, education programs, shelters, community services, libraries. People reacted in waves. My mum cried openly. One aunt fanned herself like she might faint. My dad looked stunned, as if his entire sense of the family map had been redrawn. Chloe sat frozen, face draining, then flushing, then draining again, as if her body couldn't decide whether to fight or flee. Marlene said she was sharing it now because she'd decided to step into a more public role with her giving. She talked about establishing a foundation in her grandmother's name and being more visible in the work she'd already been doing behind the scenes. Then she paused and said something that felt aimed at the whole room, but it landed hardest on Chloe. She said a person's worth isn't found in what they drive, where they live, or what labels they wear. It's in how they treat people, how they contribute, and whether they stay true to themselves when nobody is clapping. Then she sat down, and the room erupted into chaos. Questions flew. People talked over each other. My grandparents looked quietly pleased, like they'd been holding a secret they trusted her to reveal in her own time. Chloe tried to recover, and watching her attempt, it was painful in a way I didn't expect. First she laughed, too loudly, like it was all a joke Marlene had played on us. Then she tried admiration, saying she always knew there was something special about Marlene. That line didn't land, because everyone could remember the years of sneers and simple pleasures comments. Then she tried to rebrand it as teasing, as if cruelty becomes harmless if you call it banter. But the room had changed. People weren't willing to pretend anymore. Even Lachlan looked embarrassed, pulling Chloe aside and speaking through clenched teeth, like he'd warned her before and she'd ignored him, convinced there would never be consequences. Later, my mum asked Marlene why she'd never shut Chloe down all those years. Marlene hugged her and said it didn't matter because Chloe's opinion never shaped the truth of who she was. She said she hoped, maybe foolishly, that Chloe would eventually learn that status symbols don't build a meaningful life. As the night thinned out and people began leaving, Chloe approached Marlene again, this time without the sparkle, without the performance. Her voice cracked. She started to apologize, then stumbled, then paused like she'd hit a wall inside herself. Marlene asked her quietly if she meant the things she'd said over the years. Chloe hesitated, then nodded, tears forming, and that honesty seemed to hurt her more than the secret ever could. Marlene told her, gently but firmly, that the reflection wasn't for Marlene's benefit. Marlene said she'd been fine. The work Chloe needed to do was for herself. She asked Chloe why she needed someone else to look small in order to feel tall. Why Marlene's contentment threatened her. Why she clung so hard to the idea that wealth and appearance were proof of worth. Chloe didn't have answers then. She left not long after, shoulders slumped, heels clicking on the floor with a sound that suddenly felt less like confidence and more like panic. For the first time, Chloe looked like a person who couldn't hide behind her own story anymore. In the months that followed, family dynamics shifted in ways that were both obvious and subtle. Marlene started appearing in local papers for philanthropic work, not in a flashy way, but in the steady way that suggests long-term impact. Her foundation began funding practical projects, literacy programs, hospital resources, grants for women starting small businesses, support services that actually changed outcomes. She didn't move. She didn't upgrade her car. She didn't suddenly dress like someone from Chloe's world. When someone asked why she didn't enjoy the money, Marlene said the money was a tool, not a costume. She said she liked her life, and she didn't see simplicity as deprivation. She saw it as freedom. Chloe changed too, but slowly, and not in a neat, inspirational montage way. Her posts became less frequent. When she did post, it wasn't all luxury and polished captions. There were quieter moments, less staged. She started volunteering with Marlene's foundation without announcing it online, which might have been the biggest change of all. She traded her giant car for something more modest. She started therapy. At the next family gathering, she sat differently, listened more, spoke less. It wasn't a full transformation overnight. It was more like watching someone dismantle a false version of themselves piece by piece, realizing how much of their personality had been built to impress strangers. At Easter, Chloe spoke to Marlene again, this time with a tired honesty. She said she'd been thinking about what Marlene said and about why she felt compelled to put her down. She admitted she'd built her identity around external markers, her husband's success, the house, the lifestyle, the praise of people online. She said Marlene's calm contentment made her feel exposed. If Marlene could be fine without the things Chloe chased, then maybe Chloe's whole chase was built on fear. Marlene listened without gloating, without pity, and told Chloe that insecurity isn't evil, it's human, but the choices you make because of it can harm people. She said the important part is what you do once you see yourself clearly. Chloe apologized properly, not in a performative way, but in a way that sounded like it cost her something. She listed the snide comments, the judgments, the moments she tried to make Marlene feel lesser. Marlene thanked her and said something that stuck with me. She said Chloe never made her feel small because Marlene knew who she was. That line wasn't smug. It was a boundary drawn in calm ink. It reminded me that confidence doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just refuses to be moved. Chloe cried, wiped her face, and didn't try to spin it into a pretty ending. She just sat with the discomfort, which might have been the first truly brave thing I'd ever seen her do. I've thought about that night at my grandparents' house more times than I can count. Not because of the number Marlene announced, but because of what it revealed about everyone else. It showed how easily we build stories about people based on packaging, and how quickly we treat those stories as facts. It showed how cruelty can hide inside jokes, and how social status can become an excuse to stop seeing others as fully human. Marlene taught me that humility isn't pretending you have less than you do. It's not needing to prove you have more. It's living in a way that doesn't require applause to feel real. And Chloe, in her own messy way, taught me something too. Arrogance often isn't confidence. It's fear dressed up in expensive choices. It's the need to control the narrative before someone else does. When Chloe looked down on Marlene, she wasn't really judging Marlene. She was defending herself from a terrifying thought, that all the things she chased might not be the only way to be happy. When you see it like that, it doesn't excuse the behavior, but it explains the desperation behind it. It makes you realize how many people are performing success, while privately terrified of being ordinary. Now when I drive through traffic and see a personalized number plate that screams pride, I think of Marlene in her old Corolla, calm and unbothered, quietly funding change without turning it into a brand. I think of Chloe's old captions about being blessed and abundant, and how the most blessed person in that story was the one who didn't need to advertise it. Marlene once told me that the best disguise for serious power is steady kindness, and the best use of serious money is serious purpose. She wasn't delivering a quote. She was explaining how she'd been living all along. As for me, I'm still living my regular life, still working, still trying to get better at being the kind of person I respect. But I carry that lesson now like a weight in my pocket. Success isn't followers, it isn't real estate, it isn't the car sitting in the driveway. It's the way you treat people, especially the ones you think can't offer you anything. Because you never know who's wearing plain clothes while holding quiet influence, who's clipping coupons while funding hospital wards, who's keeping their head down while changing outcomes for strangers. Don't judge a book by its cover, and if you can help it, don't judge a good person by their cardigan either.